me with your loving shot, go and tell.
You're not just saying, oh, let's give clothes to the people in need, which in itself is a great mission, but you're really looking at people as individuals, as empowering them, as giving them back a dignity and telling them, yes, you are in this situation today, but you are worth it.
The overarching mission for us is to tackle clothing poverty while also tackling clothing waste. So a very little known fact is that in the UK, there are 5.5 million people living in clothing poverty. And at the same time, we are throwing away £140 million worth of clothing. So we actually could be dressing every single person who needs it with the clothes that ended up in landfill. Another one of the pillars of our organization is inclusivity, in the sense that we work together with the community that we support. There is kind of this perception that the only worthy person to seek refuge is the one that is escaping war. That is the only worthy reason for anyone to seek refuge. And there are so many reasons why people seek refuge. One of the things that they always say is that they feel like they're just stuck in this limbo where they can't do anything, they can't progress in life, they can't work, they can't access anything that they want to do, and they're just waiting. All they're doing is waiting. Fashion and sustainable fashion and circular fashion, they're all very trendy, very sexy topics. Yeah. Human rights isn't, you know?
Hi, Sol, and welcome to the Shades of Life podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So, Sol, you are an innovative entrepreneur running a fashion tech nonprofit called Give Your Best, aiming to support refugees in the UK and tackle fashion circularity at the same time. That's a great mission. To start with, can you tell us the birth story of Give Your Best, as I think it all started during COVID with a very nice story. Is that correct?
Yes, it did. It was like many things did, you know, great lockdown of 2020 brought about quite a lot of ideas when people had a little bit of time to slow down. But also, I think during that time, a lot of initiatives to support communities also came about. There was a lot of like mutual aid in like local neighborhoods and communities, and so it was a very good time as well to get people involved in supporting. And so essentially I had been volunteering in humanitarian aid for a few years, supporting primarily in refugee camps in northern France, and also families that had been resettled in Cambridge, where I lived at the time. And so so I was involved with that for a few years prior to lockdown. And then the last time that I went to northern France was like about a week or two before the first lockdown. And so it kind of, everything stopped for quite a few weeks and months, etc. And it just transpired that, you know, charities had to close down. And I think communities that were already isolated were becoming more and more isolated. And so I just essentially wanted to do something more to support the women that I was supporting at the time. Right. And it really just started with my clothes and my friends' clothes, because talking to them, they said that one of the things they needed most was clothing, and they didn't have any way to access any. So, and I thought, I have so many clothes, and I would rather them go directly to someone who needs them. So essentially it just started like that. Just took pictures of everything that me and my friends had, uploaded them to a page on Instagram, and I sent them the link for them to, and I told them to just choose what was their size and what they liked, and so that we would send them just that. And that was kind of the beginning of it.
Yeah, that sounds very much like Give Your Best today, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It kind of carried on that sort of like grassroots, like very community focused. And I remember at the time, obviously they loved the idea, because they said, oh, it's kind of like an online shopping experience that we haven't had in a long time. But also one of them said, you know, don't go through all of that trouble, because we're in no position to say no to anything that you give us. And I remember thinking, you know, you kind of internalize that the fact that you're only worth what you're given rather than being worth your own choices. And so I thought, well, if we can restore that sense of self-worth and dignity, like just giving people the choice to choose something as basic as what you want to wear and what makes you feel good and what fits your style, then why not? And so at the time it was very much just a side project for quite a long time. And then it kind of really started growing because people wanted to volunteer to support us, people wanted to donate clothes. And very quickly we realized that we needed to actually develop a system for it because we had so many people wanting to help. And then I was like, well, I don't know how to deal with all of this. And so it kind of went from there. I had no idea what was going to happen or even how to lead an organization. So I started, taking courses and going into incubators and accelerators and things like that. And then eventually we got a Tech for Good grant and we developed our tech, and then it became the first platform to do what we do. And then everything kept snowballing from there. And so here we are.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And yeah, something unexpected, but obviously it's linked to something you were doing before, supporting your own community, people in your own community, and it started from there. So can you tell us, what are you aiming to do with Give Your Best overall? What is your overarching mission, to summarize this for people?
Yeah, of course. So yes, we started supporting specifically refugee women because that is who I was working with at the time and volunteering with. But really the overarching mission for us is to tackle clothing poverty while also tackling clothing waste. So a very little known fact is that in the UK, there are 5.5 million people living in clothing poverty. And at the same time, we are throwing away 140 million pounds worth of clothing. So we actually could be dressing every single person who needs it with the clothes that end up in landfill. And so there is no true systemic solution bridging that gap. And really that is what we want to do, because we want to also do it in a way that it's empowering and dignified and taking away all the stigma that might be attached to accessing, help or charity. So
yeah, it's always been very apparent in your messages and in the way you approach, which I think is really beautiful, because you're not just saying, oh, let's give clothes to the people in need, which in itself is a great mission, but you're really looking at people as individuals, as empowering them, as giving them back a dignity and telling them, yes, you are in this situation today, but you are worth it.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
love that about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our mission is first and foremost to empower and give back dignity through choice, through, self-worth, but always in an empowering way. I think especially for marginalized communities, there's always an area, an aura of stigma, and there is also, with the best of intentions, there's a bit of power imbalance between the person or the charity that gives and those who receive. Even the very widespread saying of beggars can be choosers, that is very ingrained in the culture. And that really means if you don't have enough, then you have to accept everything that you're given. And that is very disempowering for people. And so really what we want to do is take that away and be as inclusive as possible and, give as much of a positive experience as possible. And clothing also, it's like it can be considered a little bit like superficial or frivolous even, but we communicate so much through the way that we dress. We are judged by the way that we dress. It's demonstrated, it's researched that clothing poverty can impact negatively so many aspects of your life, from access to employment if you don't have adequate clothing for an interview, access to education if you don't have access to clothing and higher education, but also uniforms to go to school, your social life, your mental health. It's just one of those things that is underlying, but really does impact people very much negatively. So
it's almost basic, as basic a need or right as food or water almost.
Yes, but it's not really discussed very much.
Definitely not. And I loved the figures you gave about, people in need of clothes, which I don't think people know very much about. And also the clothes we get rid of, which is, we are going to talk about that later, but it's enormous. And what you are doing is really making the two meet. And I really love also the energy you allow people to put out there, because I took part to some of your events, obviously, and there are always some of these refugees involved in them. And one thing that has really impressed me is the energy that these refugees have, more like the positivity. And I think that's a positivity that you have created with them. Which
I think so.
Really
to be honest, I mean, another one of the pillars of our organization is inclusivity, in the sense that we work together with the community that we support. Initially, of course, has been primarily refugee women and children. We are now kind of trying to expand as much as possible as well. We support families escaping domestic violence or victims of trafficking, just kind of communities that are quite underserved. But we do work very closely with the community that we serve, because in the end, what we are doing is for them. So if we don't develop it together with them, we're never really going to know if it's serving the community as much as it can. And so I think that in itself as well is very empowering, because we have, some of the refugee women that first came to shop with us when we were literally nothing other than my clothes on an Instagram page. Now they're part of our organization. They're in our board of directors. They're in every single team. They're models in our fashion show. They work with us. So it has really been kind of like a team effort of everyone together developing it. But I guess that's also why it gets to be quite empowering for that community, because they know that they're involved in co-creating.
And this, I find this really innovative in terms of, because in terms of leadership management, because you're saying we are helping you, but then you're becoming part of the organization, because you do have people who are working with you now. So one thing I wanted to ask you is about your name, the name of the nonprofit, Give Your Best. What is the meaning behind it? How did you choose the name?
I can't take credit for choosing the name. It's actually a very unglamorous story, but essentially when I kind of thought, okay, I want to do this a little bit more, like I want to give it a go, right? And I thought, okay, I need a couple of volunteers because I can't do it on my own, just to see if this is going to work. I put a call out there, and 2 women got back to me and said, oh yeah, let's get together and have a chat. And so we were having a chat. It was lockdown, so it was obviously Zoom. We were having one too many wines, and eventually we started thinking about, okay, what could the name be? And we were kind of, talking about what the main mission of the organization is, and of course, the concept of giving our best as an organization, but also asking donors of clothing to give their best clothing. Kind of all of that sort of came together, but the reality is that we were coming up with names, and at the same time I was looking on Instagram to see if the name was available to open a page.
We all do this, right?
And some of the ideas that came out, I was like, oh no, that one is not available, so we need to think about something else. And then one of the girls said, Give Your Best, and then it turned out that giveyourbest.uk was available to open on Instagram, and so so we opened that page
for the name.
Yeah. And then the funny thing was that Georgia, who's still in our team from that very first meeting, she said, "Oh, well, if it doesn't work out, we'll just delete it." And the funny thing is that was that last year? I think it was last year or the year before, the first ever big fashion award that we were shortlisted for, that we did go on to win. We were at the award ceremony and she was there too. And the other original volunteer was there as well, like the two that we had that talk to. And I told her, I was like, remember in the very first meeting when you said if it doesn't work out, we can delete the page. And look at us now. Give your best is out everywhere.
Your best is everywhere now. Well, great story. I love it. So you did say, because I know you started by supporting refugee women and children, that's still your primary target from what you've just told us. So are you planning to extend it? I think you just mentioned supporting perhaps women victim of domestic abuse.
Yeah. I mean, again, we started with that community because that is the community I knew. But and then we realized there is already so much need within that community, because of course it's a very underserved and vulnerable community that comes here with nothing. But essentially really our mission is to be able to support everyone living in clothing poverty, which is a very big goal, but not only in the UK, but we want to do that abroad as well. So yes, so we are definitely slowly expanding, but it's all kind of like one step at a time. So we started only with women and women's wear. We then added children, baby, maternity. We're not planning on adding menswear for donation as well. And then we start sort of partnerships with bigger charities as well who refer people to our services. So we collaborate a lot with the Red Cross and Refuge and Refugee Action. And we have a very, very long list of charities that support different communities, victims of trafficking, for example. And so they are the ones who refer clients to use our services. And then that is sort of like a vetting system that we have, but it's the main charities that refer people to us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So can you tell us the story, if you can? Obviously, we don't want, if there is anything confidential, please don't. But can you tell us the story of the refugees you have supported through Give Your Best, that shows people how it made a real difference in their life?
Yeah, I could probably tell you lots of stories, to be honest, because also the women in our team, they become your friends as well. And like, I feel very privileged to be able to make their journeys a tiny little bit better or easier, at least, knowing how difficult a lot of their journeys have been. But one of the people that comes to mind, just because she is our spokeswoman now, and you will have met her, is Kemi. She is the face of Give Your Best. She just talks to everyone about it. She shouts about it wherever she goes. She's amazing. But essentially, Kemi came to us when we first, she was one of the first people that was referred to us by another organization. And she had just received her refugee status after waiting for 4 years. And during her wait, she had a small child that she was waiting with as well. And she told us, but also she told in an interview with The Guardian that we did a couple of years ago, she also told them how while she was waiting for her refugee status and still seeking asylum, you get £4 a day. That's it. At the time it was even less. I think it's 5 now, but at the time it was like £3 or £4 a day. And she had a small child. And the last thing that they were able to afford was clothing. And she said that she used to have to try to find clothing in rubbish bins on the streets. And, she said it was so shameful and demoralizing for me to have to do that, but I had to do it for my child. So I had to go to places where people donate clothes, you know, those big bins where places that you kind of like dump all your clothes.
Yeah.
And she was like, and I would have to see if there was anything that had fallen out or anything like that, because the truth is that a lot of charity shops, they can't even afford charity shop prices, and charity shops don't give clothes for free. And so I think one of the things that she always says is that, you know, being able to have that access to clothing problem solved, and it was such a big weight off her shoulders at the time when she was looking for work, and she knew that, you know, she was looking for work and she could come to us for clothing for a job interview, and then later she started going to university and she knew that she could come to us to shop clothes to go to university. And then, you know, kind of she's been part of our journey because she then became our first employee, and then, you know, so we've been part of each other's journeys, and you can definitely see the evolution in her and also her style as well. And recently we had an event last month where she was one of the speakers, of course, and, you know, she was saying, do you like my outfit? And she was telling everybody, don't I look good? You know, and she was like, everything I'm wearing is from Give Your Best. And she was telling everyone, you know, you want to look good, we want to look good too. You know. So yeah, it's really nice to kind of see that evolution, and also see people become donors after they come out of clothing poverty.
Yeah. No, I perfectly remember Kemi, and I met her on various occasions, and she's got a big personality, and it's amazing to hear you about your story, because I obviously don't know the details, even if I've heard her telling the story several times. But, you know, she went from finding clothes in the streets to being on Channel 4 on
Yes, she was with
national
me.
TV with you, telling the story of Give Your
Yeah.
Best, you know, on
Yeah.
national TV. And that's quite something. And I'm sure for you, it must be all the more special because you have created this strong bond with her.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we were very involved as well. She then was able to be joined by some of her children that were still back home through family reunification, and we were very involved in kind of that process as well. And it's just been lovely to be able to support her, but then she supports us a lot as well. But yes, definitely one of the things that we also try to do as much as we can in kind of the raising awareness of clothing poverty, of clothing waste, but also of the rights of the communities that we support. And one of the things we always do is try as much as we can to bring people with lived experience with us whenever we do a TV appearance or a talk or anything like that. Because, you know, I can relay the information, but I don't have the lived experience, and it's
Makes
always
it more real.
all that more impactful to hear it from someone that has been through it. So recently a couple of months ago, we hosted a roundtable in Parliament. And of course, she was the one who came to speak about her experiences, because I knew that if anyone was going to make an impact, it was going to be Kemi. And so we had her to talk about her lived experience, and we had a fashion psychologist there as well to talk about the research into clothing poverty. And it was really, it was interesting, because one of the things that the attendees told us that was the most impactful and eye-opening was hearing from someone with lived experience and from the psychologist, because it's something that they don't even consider. And there were people there, you know, government representatives, but also a lot of fashion industry representatives as well. And everyone admitted that clothing poverty is not something that is discussed in either one of those sides of the table. And so that's what we want to do. We want to kind of bring it into the conversation, because having an inclusive business model, not only ours, but for fashion brands, for businesses, having a model where you're including the proportion of the population that is routinely excluded from access to clothing and so much more, but they can be part of the solution if only you design with inclusion in mind. You can be solving a lot of your problems by doing good for society. And it's not a revolutionary concept, but it's just not something that kind
No,
of
it doesn't
aligns
happen that often. Yeah, I find it really funny what you said, because I think there is nothing more impactful than real people with real stories, the one who are actually directly involved. And, when we are looking at the fashion ecosystem, I've heard the same thing, for example, with farmers who grow crops for fashion. And so many times they are not involved in the discussions about the challenges and the issues of fashion circularity and etc. And that's exactly the same. But that's great, because you're giving a voice to these women, and we definitely need that. So, Sol, where are you from yourself, and how did you come to the UK? And I wanted to ask you, is there something perhaps in your story that relates to why you are supporting refugees today? Is there a link there?
Well, yes, I mean, I am an immigrant myself. You are as well, and we know well. We know the difficulties that are involved in that, and I left my country when I was 19, looking for a better life, like many economic migrants out there in the world that are so demonized in this country. And, I lived in several countries before settling in the UK. And a lot of the time, my journey is seen as adventurous, only because I have the right passport to do so.
Yeah.
And someone else that I've met so many people that have come from South America, not that far from where I'm from, as refugees doing a very similar journey, are seen as criminal. And to me, that kind of, double-sided,
It's a question of perspective, yeah.
it doesn't. Yes, it just never sat right with me. And I think, I personally went through a lot of struggle settling here as well. And I had the right passport. I already spoke English. I'm white. I had a lot of privileges settling here. And even then, it was incredibly difficult to integrate. And so I think when it got to a point where I felt like, okay, I have a life, I have a career, I'm okay now. I don't have to keep trying and fighting. Then I thought, okay, well, let's try to help other people that are in a worse situation than I was, and so that's kind of how I got involved in supporting particularly refugees. And even though I was very supportive of the cause and very interested in their integration and helping out, etc., it wasn't until I went to a camp and talk to people who were there and listen to their stories. And as you say, the impact that you get from talking to someone with lived experience, you don't get it anywhere else. And I remember thinking that first time that I went there it was only a long weekend that I went for to support there. I remember thinking, I don't know anything. Even if I'm very supported and I thought that I knew, I didn't know anything, because all I knew was through headlines and through what other people were telling me, not the people that had experienced it. And so it really, really just shifted something in me completely. And I can positively say that one visit to that camp in northern France was like a before and after. And then from there, my life just took a different direction. And I just made it kind of my mission to bring people to tell their stories, to kind of be able to support and empower them and bring them up. And it really is the impact of real stories from people with.
Yeah, it's been a real turning point for you. I mean, I have thought about it myself since I've known you, because obviously I am an expat in the UK, but I probably came here also with preferential conditions, I would say, but still it does remain, I don't want to say difficult, but you definitely have some hurdles. You are far away from, your friends, your family, whatever. You need to settle in a new culture. And it does come with its own challenges and also its own opportunities. But when working with you in the past, I did think about these refugees who have, a lot less than we did.
Mhm.
And how
Yeah.
do they do it? You
Yeah.
know, like,
And
how
also,
do they
I
do it?
mean,
Like
you know,
£5 a day to live.
yeah, yeah. And also, as you say, even the language that is used, like, you know, you describe yourself as an expat, a lot of people do, but then it's all, I'm a linguist. Before doing this, I was an academic and I was a linguist at university. And so I find it so fascinating and also frustrating, the language that is used to describe, especially within immigration, because really migrant and migration, all it means is a person moving from where they're from to another place. That's all it is. It doesn't matter what for, why, the legal route, nothing. And yet the word migrant is used with such a negative connotation. And you get an English person that settles in another country and is an expat. But you get a person from that other country settling here, and they're an economic migrant. And really, like, the meaning is the same, the journey is the same, and yet we use different terms that have different connotations attached to it. But anyway, I digress.
That's really interesting.
I can go on different tangents.
No, that's really interesting. And that's actually something I've already discussed with guests on the podcast in the past. And it will probably happen. Well, it will actually happen very soon again. With people, who have incredible stories of migrations. But the truth is, we all have stories of migrations. Look at your ancestors. I have big stories of migrations in my family, And I love that word personally, but that's something that I find also interesting, the work that you do, because migrations are not going to stop anytime soon. If anything, it's going to, increase. And
it
then
has, it already, it does every year. Yeah.
And when people have to move because they are forced to, they can be happy, to find people like you who help and support. And that's why, what you do is so important. So I've known you for probably 2 to 3 years. We've been kind of friends, and I'll tell a little bit more about how it started. But for me, your personality has always stood out. And I think people can only love you when they meet you. That's how I see you.
That's so kind.
You're one of the people I have met in my life. I've always said this to whoever, we have been involved with together, but you are extremely driven, dynamic, compassionate. I think people can see this on the podcast. If they watch on YouTube, you always have a smile on your face. You are always super positive, even if you deal with, difficult topics and difficult situations. And also something that I've always found extraordinary with you is that you do make things happen. It doesn't remain a dream or a hope. You do make things happen. So I think the expression, an iron fist in a velvet glove suits you extremely well.
That's so nice.
I wanted to ask you, have you always been like that? Would you say it is part of your core personality?
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you so much. That's so kind way to describe me. That's really lovely to hear that I'm perceived that way, especially that when you tell me you're so driven and you make things happen. I can see how that is perceived, but like deep down, I'm always tired because I'm doing so much all the time. I'm literally just always exhausted. So I'm glad that I give off the vibe of being very energetic. It's not always the case. Have I always been like that? I think so. I don't know why, but like I said before, I left my country when I was 19, which at the time, I thought 19 was just as mature as it gets. And I was like, of course I can go and live on the other side of the world by myself. I'm 19. Now, especially after working at university, teaching 19-year-olds, I was like, what was I thinking? 19-year-olds are children. But I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One, I grew up with my dad, and he was always very encouraging for me to kind of do what I wanted to do. Growing up in a very patriarchal society that has very, very determined expectations of what women should and shouldn't do, he was very much trying as much as possible for me to not have to be constrained to do certain things. And so he was like, if you need to leave the country to go and explore other ways in which things can happen, then, you know, he was always very, very supportive. And so he helped me to get a scholarship. We unfortunately at the time we didn't have the means for me to be able to pay for myself to go abroad. So, you know, we're talking about 25 years ago in South America. You know, when I was a teenager, there wasn't even internet at the time, you know, which actually brings me to the other aspect why I think I was so driven then and continue to be it now, because I grew up in quite isolated in the sense that without internet, I didn't even have a phone until I was about 16. Not only a mobile phone, just no landline, no way to communicate. If you wanted to see a friend, you would tell them after school or high school or whatever, I'll see you in 3 days on this corner and at 12. And if you're not there, then you're not there. There was no way to communicate with people. And so I think I always was incredibly curious to see what was out there, because I couldn't see it anywhere because there was no way to explore it. And so I always had this curiosity of going out there in the world and meeting new people and learning new languages. And that was a massive drive for me always, and it continues to be. And one of the things that I really love about what we're doing now specifically is that I get to meet so many people with so many stories, and I think that is part of what gives me the energy and the drive, the fact that I meet particularly these amazing women that we support that are the most resilient and brave and incredible. And when you give them, the support to to open up and to shine and to really be themselves, they're just amazing people. And I get to spend time with them on a regular basis. And so whenever we take a hit or something doesn't work, or we lose an award or whatever, I then go back to being able to work with them, and then I realize, well, actually all of that shit doesn't matter really. What matters is what we're doing here with the community. So definitely is a matter of getting that inspiration, and that inspiration being the drive.
Oh, I love the story. I love that your dad was looking to empower you in a way, so he did this with you.
Yeah.
I have a relatively similar story in a way to you, because I grew up in a very small village in France, and it was very isolated and isolating, and I've always dreamed to go somewhere else in the world. So
yeah,
similar-ish story, yeah. So what would you say are your biggest qualities when it comes to deliver your vision for Give Your Best? I'm really asking the question also for people listening and understanding a bit more about that for inspiration.
Well, I think curiosity is very important, because there is so much to learn in this process, that if you don't have that kind of hunger for learning and for developing yourself further, it's going to be very difficult. I mean, one of the things that I've come to terms, I mean, I'm 43 now, and I essentially pivoted my career at 40 and decided to do something very different after being in academia for 15 years. And I came to a point where I thought, oh, you know what? I really want to learn how to do something completely different. And
do you do Give Your Best full time? Because you used to teach at Cambridge, am I right?
Yeah, I'm still working at Cambridge actually part-time. So I'm on now. I mean, I do Give Your Best full time, let's face it, but I still work part-time at university as well, primarily so that we can afford to hire other people and not just myself. But I think it's that you need to want to learn how to do things, and it's a whole journey. But also, there's so much to do out there in the world. You don't have to, have, just because you had one career for 15 years, you can't just go off and discover something else and another passion and learn how to do something else. So I think that is definitely something that has been key with Give Your Best, because I could have very well be like, no, I'm not doing this. And, you know, I'm going to stay in the very comfortable career that I've had for a very long time, right? Which sometimes I still think, should I just do that? Because this is really hard work. But then at the same time, you know, there's so many exciting things to do in life. And just because you're 40 doesn't mean that you don't get to do them, you know? Like if I change my career again at 60, then so be it. Why not?
Yeah, exactly. It's getting out of your comfort zone. But, you know, I mean, looking back as well, because I am in my 40s as well, I do think it's almost as if the changes are accelerating, because also with the new technologies, everything is changing, but it keeps evolving and changing. And I think it keeps also changing what our jobs are, what they look like.
Yeah.
There are things that were not exist now. There are things that can be easily replaced by technology. So you almost always need to be able to embrace change now. Otherwise, you're going to just be left behind. So I find, you know, as you said, embracing change, being curious to also and learn, it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. But also at the same time as well, be ready and willing to admit when you don't know how to do something, and be willing to accept help on how to do something, because you know, I am surrounded by people that know more than I do about everything. I'm great at having ideas. I am terrible at knowing how to execute them. And so we have a team that knows a lot more about project management and writing plans and all of those things. And I just show up and I'm like, okay, let's do this thing. Then we together figure out how to do it successfully. But I wouldn't be able to do that by myself. I wouldn't know where to start. So it's important to accept the help of people that know how to do things in areas that you don't know. I think as a leader of an organization and a team, you very much have to know how to say, I don't know how to do that, and let someone else that's better than you do it.
Yeah, especially also if you want to grow, you definitely need to be able to do that.
Yeah.
That's great messages, Sol. So, how many refugees have you supported since you started Give Your Best? Do you know?
Yes, so currently we support around 3,500 people, and who are registered to use our platform on a regular basis. So yeah, I would say around that.
Yeah,
About
amazing. Yeah, really amazing. So I wanted to ask you, do you know what the background of the refugees you support is? Where are they from usually? What are the main reasons you see for them to seek refuge in the UK? That would be interesting to know a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the reasons are as varied as there are people seeking refuge in this country. And it's really interesting that you asked that, because there is kind of this perception that the only worthy person to seek refuge is the one that is escaping war. That is the only worthy reason for anyone to seek refuge. And there are so many reasons why people seek refuge. From war, of course, is one of them, but there are so many other types of conflicts. There are environmental reasons as well, especially recently, and that's going to become one of the main reasons for displacement around the world. Persecution, sexual orientation, all sorts of reasons that people come to seek refuge here. And you know, there's people from all over the world that we support, and it's so interesting to see that the very narrow concept that in general people have of who should and shouldn't, when really legally anyone can seek asylum for any reason at all. And then there is a whole system that then decides whether they are, you know, legally entitled to get refugee status or not. And in the UK, it's an incredibly high percentage of people that do get refugee status, most of them after a very long time, unfortunately. But yeah, there's a great variety of reasons.
Yeah, I remember meeting some of the people working with you, and they had been in the UK for several years, and they still didn't have this, the papers, the status.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I'm sure that you remember Cinderella, one of the models in the fashion show. She was amazing. She's also part of our team.
Yeah.
And I remember in the little video that we created for the fashion show, she was saying how doing things like the fashion show and working with us, etc., kind of gives her the sense that there's a world that is still waiting for them. Because one of the things that they always say is that they feel like they're just stuck in this limbo where they can't do anything, they can't progress in life, they can't work, they can't access anything that they want to do, and they're just waiting. All they're doing is waiting. And so having the opportunity to be part of an organization, to be part of a team, to do the fashion show, like things like that, for her, she was saying in this video that it gives her the sense of there's still a world out there when we get out of this limbo. And she got her refugee status this year, so
obviously,
she's now
because I was actually thinking of her when I was asking the question. Oh, so she got
she got it, and she is now at university and working, and she's finally in that world that was waiting for her, and she's still of course in our team as well.
She will go far, I'm sure.
I know, she's amazing.
Energy, and she wants it.
Yeah.
So I was also asking the question because obviously when we collaborated together, I was really amazed to see the diversity of the refugees. And as you said, they can come to the UK for so many different reasons, but also from so many different countries and parts of the world. And I remember we did a fashion show together, and there were 10 models modeling.
Yes.
All of them were coming from a different country. And it was really amazing to see. So apart from this, I wanted to ask you, is this diversity aspect something you enjoy yourself? I think you've kind of answered that before, but I love diversity, and I think it's important to also talk about diversity in a positive way. Because as you said, when we're talking about refugees, there is always this kind of fear factor or negative factor, when it can be something so positive, as an experience to be surrounded by these women with such diverse backgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that we attempt to do with our fashion show, which is, as you very well know, celebrate them and their differences and their different backgrounds and experiences, and kind of empower them as well to show themselves in a positive light. What we want, like anyone who comes to our fashion shows or even participates in our organization or donates, etc., is kind of just what we want is for people to also associate what a refugee is with a beautiful woman that is been having the time of her life on a runway looking amazing. And that is also what a refugee is, because it's only a part of their journey, it's not their entire identity. And I do think that, as I've been gushing about all these women the entire interview because I think that they're really some of the most amazing people I've met. But yes, I consider diversity incredibly enriching. My experiences living in different countries and my views of the world have been immensely influenced by the people that I've met and the people that I've talked. And I want to keep growing in that way, and I want to keep chatting to people and learning about different experiences, because that's the only way that we learn anything, really. Otherwise, you just have your own experience and your own way of seeing the world, and that's all you're ever going to have.
Yeah, and just to flip things around a little bit again, people love traveling, and everybody knows that traveling opens your mind, as you just said, to new ideas, new cultures, new experiences. But the fact is, you can also have this at home, because we are surrounded by communities from all over the world. Just you and I were not from the UK, and we met in the UK.
Yeah.
But
that's very true. And actually, it's really interesting because we see that as well through our donors. Like, it has happened a few times where people you know, they upload an item to donate to our platform, and then someone shops it, and then they receive a notification saying who shopped it and where to ship it. And we've had a few instances of people emailing us to say the person who shops it lives down the street, and they didn't even know. And they were like, can I go and like hand it in directly? And then of course we have to get in touch with the person and be like, are you okay with this person delivering it themselves, because they just live like right next door.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, you are connecting people, and even through an item of clothing, you know, we encourage donors to write a little note to support, to send like little extra gifts, to make it something special, because you are connecting to people. You know, as a donor, you know that on the other side of the package you're sending is a woman that has your same sense of style, because they chose your own clothes, that are your same size, but are living in very different circumstances, even down the road. And a lot of the time we are so used to being in our own little world, in our own little house, that we don't really know what's happening even in, you know, out there in our own community. So I would certainly encourage people to, you know, to get involved and with local charities. You know, it could be supporting, you know, there's so many supporting a variety of
that's
causes,
funny.
you know.
Yeah, that's funny you bring that up, because there are other people who do that very well in the UK in another area, which is food. It's the non-profit called Olio.
Yes, yeah.
I was actually at an event with them last Monday, which was
They
great.
were a big inspiration in what we do.
Yeah, and you know, just like you offer free clothes to people in need, they offer free food. I mean, they have an app where people can offer their food for free to people in need.
Yeah.
But then it's people in their own neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And I think that, as you just said, that makes you realize that there are people in need in your own neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are, you know, I wanted to also point out that, you know, diversity is in everything. You know, you can volunteer with organizations supporting people with disabilities, or people, you know, that have very different lived experience to yours, and that's kind of what really expands the way that you see the world.
Yeah, amazing. So, Sal, we mentioned that we collaborated together on a fashion show about 2 years ago, and it is called the Good Fashion Show, and you had several ladies.
So much fun.
You know what? I say this to whoever wants to listen to it. It's been one of the best experiences of my entire life.
I know.
Very much.
Me too. Absolutely a highlight. It was the first fashion show we ever did, one. And second, it was actually the first time that a lot of our team met in person, because we were just coming out of lockdown, and because we started online, we had been working together with a lot of people for about a year, and we had never met in person. And people came from everywhere, from Scotland, from all over the UK, to that fashion show, and we all met in person for the first time, and it was really special.
Yeah, so I feel like we need to give a little bit of background to people now.
Yes,
so it took place in London. I can't remember, I think it was 3 years ago. And we combined, so you invited 10 sustainable fashion brands to dress the refugee model. So there were 10 in total, and you had a whole team to help you organize it, a whole team of volunteers who were all absolutely amazing. And we had a live artistic performance with 10 models walking the catwalk. My participation is that I was working for an American sustainable fashion company, and we provided bespoke shoes painted by our resident artist, who is an amazing and renowned painter in the US, originally from Bulgaria, so he's an expat as well. Yeah. And he personalized the shoes for each model according to what they were wearing. And the concept with the fashion show and the live experience was that the model had to dip their shoes in paint. And as they walked the catwalk, their shoes left paint imprints as a symbol of stepping into a new life. But at the same time, they created a live artwork, which was amazing. I remember the energy in the room was insane.
It was so good.
After the show, it was even more insane. Like, honestly, it's been the best experience of my life.
It was amazing because we had, like, I remember when they were coming out, and one of the the impactful things as well, other than the live art show, which was just incredible. But also there was, as each model walked, there was a voiceover, a recording of themselves talking about who they are and their dreams and where they come from and what fashion means to them. And the juxtaposition of the art with them telling their story and the music, and like everyone was cheering them on and like dancing. And I remember looking around and it was like one person would be cheering, the next person would be crying, the next person would be laughing, and the next person would be crying again. And it was just like so many emotions.
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. So that leads me to my next question, because I also learned through that particular live show, because as you said, it was amazing to have their voiceover telling about their background, their hopes and dreams. So I wanted to ask you, what would you say are the biggest challenges that these refugees you meet who give your best face? And also what their hopes and dreams usually are for the future, from what they share with you.
Yeah, I mean, challenges are an endless list of challenges, really. I think what's important to highlight is the fact that when people come here, just because they're physically safe, it doesn't mean their journey has ended, but a new journey begins when they're here. And also, absence of danger doesn't necessarily mean safety, because when a person is here, they want to be safe, yes, physically, but also mentally. So they need, mental health support. They want to be safe economically. They need help with finding a job. They want to continue their studies. They want to rebuild their lives. And in order to rebuild your life, you don't only need to not be in danger. You need a whole host of support to rebuild your life. And I think that range of support at the moment doesn't really exist here. And so the journey for them to be able to do that is very long. It can take many years. And so from the limbo that they are in while they're waiting to receive that status, that is a really, really tough period in itself for a range of reasons. But then once they get the refugee status, there's another journey that starts then as well, because getting your status doesn't mean that all of a sudden everything is solved. But actually what it means is that once they get their status, the Home Office serves them a notice saying you have 3 weeks to leave the accommodation that we've been providing for the last however time they've been there. And that's it. They need to vacate. And they have 3 weeks to open a bank account, to find a job, to rent a new place, to all of that. And that is pushing a lot of people into homelessness. And so you go from like this really difficult period of time to then to finally getting your resolution, which is getting your refugee status. But then you realize actually the next step might even be harder. And so it's such a tough process. And when I say that these people are some of the strongest, most resilient people I've ever known, it's true. Like how, like going through that system, it to me is just, I couldn't even imagine. So I think everyone that I talk to, that we support and that I've met, all they want to do is just rebuild their lives. All they want to do is to be able to have a comfortable place to live, be able to study again or work again or raise their kids, or, just to have a life, but a life that is well-rounded, not just a life that
Just surviving.
where you're not in danger, right? So I think that that's something that also doesn't quite meet the expectation of what people think about when they think someone comes here fleeing war. Oh, they're safe here, so what else do they want? Well, a person is a whole host of different aspects of a person's life. It's not just...
Yeah, this is when you see, we all, to a certain extent, we all live in our own little bubble, but that's true for them too. And we all have our hopes, and, everybody's the same. They are not different. Nobody's different. Yeah. Well, thank you for making it real for us. I mean, that's also the objective of having this conversation, is to really make these stories more real for people, because, you know, we don't get to hear that very often.
Yeah. And also thank you for bringing this, you know, bringing me here to talk about these topics, because this is what we're trying to do as well. I mean, fashion and sustainable fashion and circular fashion, they're all very trendy, very sexy topics.
Yeah.
Human rights isn't, you know, and so particular, I know, particular refugee rights.
Yeah.
And so I, you know, we do try to bring that into the conversation and into the fashion conversation, and how, you know, the fashion industry, yes, they are the culprit of, you know, fashion waste and pollution, etc., you know, environmental degradation, but at the same time they also hold the key to solve it. And so it's important to bring all of these different aspects into the conversation as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I won't cite any name because that's actually someone I'm hoping to invite to the podcast. But I think we also need to remember that every person, every human has a lot of potential. You know, you can find yourself in a difficult situation at one point. It doesn't mean that, you know, in 2 years, you're going to still be in the same situation. And you can contribute so much, you know, your life can change, but you can also contribute so much to the world. And there is this great story of a refugee who I think came from Rwanda, very young, in his teens, with his father. And they were in the UK living in poverty, like you explained on this podcast, living with nothing, living in the streets. And he got scouted by a fashion agency, a fashion model agency, and he became a very sought after, very successful model in fashion. And so became, you know, very rich in the process. But he also created his own foundation to support and help people in his country of origin. And he's doing an amazing job. I follow his story regularly. And, you know, that kind of transformation story, that's what I love. And I think we also need to project that, because it's not because you're in a tough situation, difficult situation today,
Yeah.
that, you know, it's going to be the same tomorrow. We also need to see the value of a human life is.
Absolutely.
So when I met you 2 or 3 years ago, Sol, Give Your Best was still very small, but like any great idea, it took off very quickly. You've been live on Channel 4, we mentioned that. You've been featured in Vogue on various occasions. Congrats. Recently, I think. You won various awards. You had, we were talking about that. You just won another one last night for Startup. Did you think in the beginning of Give Your Best that people would resonate with it, with your messages, and that it would go that big and that far?
Absolutely not. Like I was saying before, you know, it started as a lockdown project because we were not allowed to do anything else with our lives other than be at home. And so, you know, I wanted to do something to help. But I certainly didn't imagine it would. At a certain point, when I realized that it was something that was really needed, and also that there was an appetite from the general public to support it, that's when I kind of thought, oh, maybe there's something here. Let's see if this type of platform that I had sort of envisioned to be like the Vinted for Good, if something like that existed already. And it turned out it didn't. And at the time, I couldn't believe that it didn't exist, because it's really, I mean, we win a lot of awards for innovation, but let's face it, it's not a revolutionary concept. You know, it's just that no one had ever done it before.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, why? Is this a terrible idea? Why has no one done it before?
Yeah.
And then, you know, and then I was like, well, let's give it a go. Why not? If anything, it could be a really interesting journey, and we can support a few people along the way, and what is there to lose? And here we are. It still baffles me sometimes, the things that we're doing.
But you know, you are the living example that something can start really small and grow. You know,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
exactly
And also,
what we were
and
saying.
to be honest, the support. I mean, you have supported us since the very beginning as well, but just the support that we get from people, and people wanting to get involved in our projects, and whenever we think of an idea of something that we want to do, most of the time it happens really quickly, because the moment we put it out there, we get so much outpouring of love and support to try to do, so, which doesn't mean that it hasn't been challenging.
Yeah.
It is incredibly challenging.
Always.
It's a
You don't
constant.
need the sexy aspect of it,
Yes, it's behind the scenes. I am constantly stressed about not getting enough funding. Are we going to be able to like cover our rent? Can we, do we have enough partners? Like all of those things.
So I'm gonna jump on this, because looking at Give Your Best from an entrepreneurial perspective, how did you manage to set it up when you started it? I wanted to ask you if you could tell us, because I think you got an initial grant initially, which allowed you to get started. So if we want to inspire other people who would want to set up a nonprofit, could you tell us about your experience when you started and what allowed you to get started?
Yeah, of course. So when we first got registered, we registered as what is called in the UK a community interest company, which means that you are a social enterprise / a business, but a non-profit business. So you're not a charity, but you're not a for-profit business. So that is it's kind of that in the middle without being either of those.
Yeah.
What that means is that you can access some funding and some grants from the non-profit and charity sector. Not all of them, because there's a lot that is geared only towards charities, but there's a lot that nowadays also supports social enterprises. And you can also access, like we do, some of the competitions that are for regular for-profit startups, which I'm always a little bit unsure about entering those, because we're not necessarily profit driven, but it's also a really nice example for people to realize actually there are businesses that are non-profit out there, which is an example is the award that we won yesterday. And so that is essentially a relatively easy way to start a non-profit, because the process of applying for a social enterprise or a non-profit business is a lot faster than applying to be a charity. Okay. So that is something that we still are considering. Maybe eventually we'll split into a charity and potentially keep this arm of things. But the process of applying for charity status, it takes quite a lot longer, and it can take a bit of time to build. And we just kind of wanted to get started and wanted to be able to start applying for funding. So yeah, so we're still a social enterprise at the moment. And yes, we have been lucky enough to raise quite a lot of funds from grants. The first one that allowed us to develop our tech platform was kind of really changing for our organization, because we were doing everything manually before that via Google Forms and email and all of that, which was not sustainable at all. I don't know how we managed to do that for nearly a year. But eventually we were able to launch our current platform, which has been game changing for the organization. So I do recommend going down the route of applying for grants. And then last year we won an Innovate UK grant, which was not only, well, yes, obviously financially was also game changing for the organization, but also to have the backing and the belief from the UK Research and Innovation Agency, which has a lot of connections and really only backs projects that are innovative and quite game changing as well. So so that was quite an important step for us. And then earlier this year we were one of the winners of the eBay Circular Fashion Fund as well, so we have received a lot of support from that too. So kind of getting involved in different competitions and funding and things like that in the industry has been both challenging, rewarding when it works out, soul destroying when it doesn't.
But I know that you've always been trying, and we met a few weeks ago in London, and I remember you told me we always try, I always try, you know, and you've always tried.
Yeah, we always try. I mean, it was difficult at first. I was talking about this to someone in the team yesterday because we always apply to so many things. And at the beginning, it was really difficult to take those rejections when you didn't get a grant because you pour so much of your not only time but your passion. And when it's your baby, it's like the saying no to your dreams. But as time goes on, it gets easier to take those punches, right? So you just know that
and it's not because you get a rejection, but it's always going to be a no when you need to try again. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And also, if you don't put yourself out there, then no one is going to know that you exist. So most of the time, I just, I kind of had to learn that if I don't apply for things, awards, whatever it is, then I'm saying no to us. And I rather someone else say no to us, because if we don't do it, then we're not going to get any yeses. And so I try everything.
That's lovely put together. Yeah. So moving on, so thank you for that. I think that's important to talk about, money also, and how you get investment as part of a venture, whether it's non-profit or not. So moving on a different topic. So one topic that matters as part of the overall picture of what you do at Give Your Best is fashion circularity. Fashion overproduction, waste and pollution is a topic we both know very well, I think. I'm still always surprised, because I do take part to networking events, conferences, I've presented events myself, and I'm always surprised how little people know still about it. So can you give us perhaps some key statistics and markers about fashion waste that you would like people listening to keep in mind?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's just an area of the industry that is not very transparent. So it's actually very difficult to find information of what happens to clothes that either don't get sold or that are returned back to brands, or that, whatever it is real. What happens after a person buys an item of clothing or after it's produced, it's very difficult to find what happened. So I think that definitely transparency needs to be part of legislation that hopefully will come soon to the UK. We know that there's already legislation coming out of the EU regarding extended producer responsibility and greenwashing and sustainability and that sort of things. So I'm really, really hoping that that is in the future for the UK as well. When we hosted this parliamentary roundtable, one of the essentially the consensus that came out of that is that until there is legislation, it's very hard to get brands to do the right thing, because you can appeal to their ethics and ESGs and CSR and all of that, but unless they have to do it, is an industry that is so historically profit driven that it is changing, but it's a slow change that will be accelerated with legislation. And so that really is what is going to make the biggest difference.
Yeah. I think you said something very important about transparency, because transparency is also about the amount of clothes that fashion companies produce. We don't even know that. There is a very small number of fashion companies today who actually publish the number of clothes they produce every year. So even that, when we see estimates, and currently the estimates are between 100 and 150 billion billion garments every year, which is massive, because we're only 8 billion people on the planet.
Yeah.
I always remind people, to put things in perspective. But even that is only an estimate, because there is such a lack of transparency. And I love that you bring up legislation, because I think it has to go through this if we want to see real progress Otherwise, it will remain a lot of either inaction or greenwashing or not going fast enough, for sure. So you mentioned the House of Lords. So that was my next question to you, because it was earlier this year, I think you hosted a parliamentary roundtable at the House of Lords. You have to tell me how all this happened. And, you know, it was around your favorite topics, clothing poverty and fashion waste. So can you tell us more about this particular event? Who was there and what was the main outcomes of it?
Yeah, so I mean, how it happened, like anything, we just tried and it worked out.
Here we go, it worked.
You know, we in a discussion we thought how great would it be to bring the discussion of clothing poverty to the place where decisions happen. And so someone from the team, our partnerships lead, Davina, just said, you know what, let's give it a go. And she said, I know, she did a bit of research. She found that someone in the House of Lords was very active in sustainability and had recently talked about sustainable fashion and fashion waste in, you know, in one of their forums. And so she reached out, told her about us and what we do. She loved what we're doing. We had meetings with her, and then she sponsored us to host this this roundtable. So she was there, this Baroness Heyman, and so we invited, so she invited some people from her side, and then we invited people on our side as well from fashion industry. So we had a really interesting mix of experience as well. We had people from some small brands that are more sustainable. One of them is one of our partners as well. We had the likes of eBay and Selfridges there. We had people that were experts in sustainable fashion, then people with lived experience as well to talk about the impact of clothing poverty. And so the idea really was to discuss how we can work together and what the barriers are for really having, you know, initiatives and creating change. And yeah, it was really interesting to hear on the one hand government representatives saying that unfortunately it is true that clothing poverty is not necessarily discussed very much in their manifestos, and on the other hand to hear as well that in the fashion industry isn't either. It's not something that they consider to be their part of, you know, their responsibility. And I understand that it might not be, but also it could be. They could, the fashion industry as a whole could be solving clothing poverty, you know? And so I think that it was a really exciting first step in opening this conversation, essentially. We are not the only ones working in clothing poverty and trying to tackle that. There are charities and organizations doing that. There is a whole campaign called the Right to Clothing campaign that we are a signatory of. So it's hopefully growing, hopefully.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's a nice way to bring purpose into what companies do at the same time. I mean, I was impressed to see your list of attendants, because there was Amy Pooney from Mother of Pearl. I mean, she's someone really well known in the UK, because I think she did win.
Yeah, she was great. And actually, she brought the very interesting point of, you know, we need to discuss why clothing poverty exists at all in the UK, in one of the 5 more important, you know, powers economically.
So that brings me to my next point, because you now partner with brands and retailers to improve their circularity and social impact via your repurpose program. Can you tell us about that? And perhaps it's an opportunity to give a call to action to fashion brands on the podcast.
Yeah, so essentially what our repurpose program offers is a solution that is circular and sustainable to stock that is either not being sold or samples, anything that is just sitting there and that may or may not end in questionable circumstances, either landfill or exported abroad, etc. So what we do is we ensure that that stock actually goes on to alleviate clothing poverty. And so we as a team process all of those items from our brand partners, and through our platform we manage that stock ourselves, and that then goes on to communities that need it through our platform. So our platform still remains around 70% peer-to-peer donation, in a vintage for donation sort of way, but then the remaining 30% is stock that is managed by us from our brand partners. And essentially we are here for anyone who wants to partner with us.
Yeah,
And I mean, it's really a win-win, because, you know, we then provide impact reporting to our partners that tells them exactly where everything ended up, so that they can then be transparent as to where their clothes are going, so they can tick those ESGs and, you know, align with sustainable development goals. And really we are achieving social impact on their behalf with clothes that might otherwise end up not
in landfills, as
in not such good circumstances.
Yes. Oh, yeah, burns,
Yeah.
and we don't know about it.
Yeah.
But what you do with your repurpose program, I find it's really interesting, because it also reminds me another company in the UK called Sojo. I've actually done some work as well with them in the past. But basically, they are a company offering repair or alteration services. And
Yeah.
it's been a couple of years. We have developed a lot of brand partnerships around that, and offering a solution to brands to actually, you know, incorporate solutions to reuse, reduce, or recycle within their business model, which, you know, moving forward, everybody should be doing this. So with your repurpose program, you do offer a solution to brands, and perhaps it won't be the whole of your business, but when a brand needs a solution, you exist, you are there, and they can partner with you.
That is really what we want to do. We kind of want to establish ourselves as an option for the solutions that brands are going to, by law, need to adopt when the legislation comes to the UK. So at the moment, I'm not going to lie, it's a bit of a hard sell for brands, because really we are preempting the problem at the moment. In their eyes, they don't have a problem, because no one is telling them that they do. You know,
legislation
and so
is coming.
Right, so we are having to convince them that actually they do have a problem and we can solve it. So we're kind of doing like two jobs. We're having to do two jobs, whereas if we had legislation, it would be a lot easier for us.
But you know, we were talking of Olio and the food system earlier, and they actually have a bit of a problem to monetize what they do, but their biggest clients today are the likes of Waitrose, Sainsbury's, and they get their food. I'm sure it's going to get there at some point with fashion brands as well.
That's what we're hoping. That's what we're hoping,
yeah. You to get those. Okay, so you did mention this earlier, and I wanted to explore that a bit further with you. But this year, Give Your Best has also been one of the 6 winners of the eBay UK Circular Fashion Funds program out of thousands of entries, I think. So were you surprised that you were one of the winners? Big congratulations first.
Thank you.
And can you tell us, what does it aim to do? How do you benefit from it?
Yeah, I was surprised. I applied the previous year and we didn't get shortlisted. So that goes to show you need to keep trying, because you never know. And also we had grown a lot. We had a lot more clearer business plan and model, and you know, we had evolved quite a lot in that year. So I decided to try again, and it worked out, and we were one of the 6 selected solutions. And it was an amazing opportunity, not only because I met the fellow circular solutions, but also, of course, there was a financial prize too for all of us, and we got to really see the way that certain aspects of fashion work from the inside. That was, to me, as someone who doesn't come from a fashion background, that was one of the most interesting and useful things for me to see, because we had people from brands explaining how things actually work. We had a lot of people from eBay explaining how things actually work, and it was quite enlightening to learn from people that do this, you know, on a daily basis. And so yeah, it was really exciting. And also, you know, it, especially for startups, it gives you recognition and it gives you legitimacy as well. And you know, now when I say that we have been backed by Innovate UK and we won the Circular Fashion Fund, and we were also in 2023 chosen as by the British Fashion Council as one of the innovations of the year for circularity as well. And so like kind of all of these things they all come together to sort of show the world that solutions like ours are actually well received in the fashion industry. So hopefully we'll keep building on that as well.
Yeah, amazing. So last but not least, I wanted to bring up another example of something that has been really positive for you, because I am very familiar with their sustainability programs. I've actually taken several of their online courses. So Give Your Best has been selected this year as a finalist for the Fashion Values Showcase at the Global Fashion Agenda Summit. And I love what Fashion Values do. Their programs are amazing. So you went to Copenhagen, I think, for that?
I didn't get to go, actually,
Oh,
unfortunately. I didn't. I was gutted to not be able to go, but there was a lot of people that we've met along the way in this journey that were there, and they were all messaging me to say, oh, we saw you in the showcase, which is really great.
Okay, yes. So I wanted to ask you, how has this experience been for you? What did you learn from it? Because I love the nuggets of wisdom you bring up. Like, you know, you were just taking the eBay example. You applied 1 year, you were not even selected. You apply the next year, you are one of the winners. How amazing is that?
It's the journey and it's the growth, you know.
Yeah, and you learn every time.
I do, and I appreciate. And it's really interesting because I realize now I keep applying for things that we didn't even get selected last year or the year before, and now I fill in the applications and I feel like, oh, now I know what we're doing. I know why we weren't selected last year, because we didn't have the clarity that we have now, because we've experienced the whole year of doing things very differently and learning new things and trying new things. So I'm sure that next year I'll apply for something that we didn't get this year, and we're going to be further in our journey.
It's only the beginning.
It was very similar with Fashion Values as well. I thought I wasn't sure if we were right for it, because I thought that it was more to do with like fashion design and brands, etc. And then I thought, you know what, if we don't tell our story, then no one is going to know that there's a different way to do certain things. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to just tell them what we do. And if they like it, they can let us through. And if they don't, that's fine as well. And so
and I do remember that for their last call of entries, they had a much bigger focus on the societal impact.
Yeah,
which I think suits really, really well. So for me, it made sense.
Yeah.
So moving on to also an interesting topic, and we haven't discussed that so much so far. So I remember I took part to one of your clothes donation pop-ups during the Fashion District Festival in Shoreditch about a year ago. And well, first of all, when you do one of these events, I'm almost kind of shocked by the sheer amount of clothes donated. I think this is when you realize we have so many clothes. And we had so many to sort out, and it was probably just a drop in the ocean for you compared to what you deal with during the whole year. So you had a lot of volunteers to help through the pop-up. I wanted to ask you, can you tell us about your volunteers? Because I think it is an important support network for you, and I think they need a little bit of shout out as part of this conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. As I said before, we wouldn't I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for a team of volunteers. There's absolutely no way I would have been able to do any of this. And I draw a lot of energy and motivation from them too, because I know how passionate they are about what we do as well. And it gives me, apart from inspiration as well, but it's kind of like I know that our team have my back. So even sometimes when I'm feeling a little bit like burned out, or like I need to take a little break, I know that our team is there and they can keep this going even if I'm not, if I need a little break. So yes, honestly, our team of volunteers, as you know, can do anything. They can organize an entire fashion show and
And very well.
carry it out incredibly well. And I remember one of our partners as well, in the last year. So last year we did another fashion show. It was in Cambridge in partnership with Cambridge Grand Arcade, and it was big. That one was. It was not 10 models, it was like 25, and it was women and children, and there were hundreds of people that came. And someone came to me and they said, their organization was amazing, everything worked fantastic. And I did say it was organized all by volunteers, and they just couldn't believe it, how like well everything went, and everything was done by volunteers. They're just the best people in the world.
Yeah. And, that's something I will explore more and more moving forward. But I think, when people like you set up a non-profit like Give Your Best, you also offer other people the opportunity to get invested into something with meaning. And I find that's really important, because sometimes people don't really know, how to help, or, and having charities or non-profits like yours, that gives opportunities to people to really do something useful. So I think it's important.
Yeah, that's really nice that you mentioned that, because that kind of I realized that when one of our team, I think it was after the first year or so that we were operating, and she sent me a Christmas card. And in the card, she said, I know that we always talk about the impact that we have on the community and the women that we help and the work that we do, but I don't think that you realize the impact that you have on the team, and what an amazing community we have as a team of volunteers, and how much we all like bond together and like love doing what we do and things like that. So yeah, it's also, for me, the team is like, it's my favorite people in the world. I just love working with them. It's almost like I feel like I'm creating, selfishly, my dream job with my dream team in my dream organization, the job that I could never get anywhere else. Like I'm kind of like creating it now.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what you are doing. And if I try to compare you with someone, you remember the former Prime Minister of New Zealand? For me, you have a very similar type of personality that you.
Oh, please do not say Jacinda, because I will die.
Yeah, of course. But you really do things so genuinely and with people in mind, and with such a good mindset. For me, that's the leaders of tomorrow. That's the leaders I want to see tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
So a few more questions. So there has been a lot of milestones since you started Give Your Best, and we discussed quite a few. What milestone would you say has had a particular meaning to you?
Our first fashion show, and I'm so glad that you were part of it. Like I said before, it was such a special day. Like it will forever, but whatever happens to Give Your Best, it will forever be part of like just a highlight of my life. It was such a beautiful day as well, meeting our team and meeting a lot of our community in person as well. I think it was because after such a long period of being isolated and doing everything online and lockdown and all of that, coming out of that, and it was in September 22, so it was a couple of years ago, not that long ago. And it was just doing that was just amazing.
We
So
spent the
certainly
whole,
that's one of them.
we spent the whole day together as well, because what
Yeah.
people don't see is that before the event, there is a lot of things.
Oh, there's so much preparation.
Rehearsals, everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and not only on the day, we were
Oh, yeah,
planning
before
months
as well.
beforehand, but also the day, yes, from the beginning to end with a whole team of models and everything. It was absolutely wonderful. Definitely that. And I mean, so many, but also most recently, our first in-person like physical store that we launched. It was only last month, but it's definitely a highlight for the same reason. It always comes down to that collaboration and community, like that was one of my favorite things to be in that shop as well. But essentially the concept of the store, which we are really hoping we're going to be able to have a permanent store, but the concept of it is that it's a pay it forward store. So any item purchased, which is either secondhand or excess stock from our partners, goes directly to fund someone from our community to shop in that same store, but for free. So what we want is for it to be like a really inclusive shopping experience where if you can afford the clothes, you buy them, and if you can't, then you don't have to, but you shop side by side. So no one is, there's no stigma, there's no exclusion, everyone is in the same store in a beautiful shop. You can shop whatever you want and you don't have to pay for it. And we trialed it last month, and it was an amazing experience. Apart from, actually, it went really well revenue wise. We sold a lot of clothes, which is really great, of course, for us as an organization. We're always struggling financially. But we also supported around 200 women from our community, women and children, that came in the store to shop, and just to be there and chatting to them. And it was such a wholesome experience, like for me as well. We had the couple of days that I was there, we had like some people that came in and they were by themselves and they were a little bit unsure, didn't know what to try on. And we kind of decided, what, me and the other girls that were there were like, okay, we'll be your besties for the day. So like, you go and try things on, you come outside, show us the dress that you're trying on, we'll tell you which one looks better. And it was kind of like a very empowering experience, and kind of
just a normal shopping experience, isn't it?
Yeah, and also it's a little, a bit of solace in like people's daily, struggles, because a lot of them are really struggling. And
people usually don't go to shops to shop for clothes.
No, and that was actually
that opportunity.
Feedback that we received several occasions from different people was that they would have never felt like they could go to that area to shop, because it's a really nice area in Islington to go and shop. And they just felt like even the whole experience of knowing that they could go in a shop and like find something that they liked in an area that everyone else goes shopping, it was very uplifting for them. Like they felt very included. And we had lovely feedback in terms of like how much of a positive experience it was for them to just be able to have a nice experience.
I think that's important you mentioned that, because I visited the pop-up shop and it was absolutely beautiful.
It was lovely, wasn't it?
Different from any other clothing shop.
Yeah, it was a really lovely space to just spend time. I loved just going in there.
It's great to see you, trying new things. It was your first pop-up shop.
And the clothes were beautiful. I bought lots of clothes.
So moving forward, Sol, what are your plans for the future with Give Your Best? Anything you can share with us, or any hopes and dreams?
Well, fingers crossed we're going to be able to have a longer term store. I think after trying it for that 1 month, it was something that we've been talking about for a while, and then finally all the little moving pieces came together very last minute, and we decided to do it in June. And it went so well that now we definitely want to have that more permanently, and hopefully have more than one store. The plan in 3 to 5 years is maybe having more stores across the country, but then always also with our online platform. So kind of like really to complement each other. And we want the stores to almost act as community centers where people can come and like volunteer at the store and etc. So that is definitely one big goal for the next little while. And then yeah, absolutely continue growing the platform, more partnerships, and raising awareness within the fashion industry that, you know, they could be doing some good things by partnering with us. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. So another question, because I remember that's something you had mentioned to me when we met initially. Do you have any plans to export the concept to other countries, or did you meet anybody who would want to export?
Yeah, absolutely. We get asked all the time from people in other countries asking us if we know if there's anything like us in other countries, which there isn't, in whether we are thinking about doing the same thing in other countries. And we definitely are. I think it's obviously a little bit more of a long-term goal. We need to get it right first here. And then when we know exactly how we do it properly here, and we can build kind of like a blueprint and framework that we can then take to a different country, a different community, but kind of build it within the community. We don't want to do it from here to there. So we would take it there and we would build it with community who needs it there, with volunteers from there, kind of like, yeah, more that than from here. But yeah, I mean, you know, why not?
Yeah, no, I love the spirit. And I also love that you're being, because obviously you had a lot of successes, but obviously you're still developing and testing. And, you know, I love how realistic you are about the steps you took, but also what is still to be done for your blueprint to be one that you can actually export and you know that it works.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's still, we're still working on it here, and we've been developing it for a couple of years now. I mean, in terms of the tech can be used from anywhere really, so that's not an issue. But it's not only about that, it's about the communities that we support, it's about how we run it, is, you know, there are so many different aspects to it. But yes, eventually.
So last question.
Yeah.
I always end this podcast with the same question to know more about each guest with a completely different angle. If you were a color, what would it be and why? And you are going to add your color to the Shades of Life podcast.
Oh, really? Well, in that case, I think I would probably say red. Either, it's interesting, it's either red or yellow. I'm always between the two. Primarily because, you know, my name being Sol, which means sun in Spanish. Yellow is always like, I love how happy and kind of hopeful it is. But I kind of feel like it would be red, just because it's sort of like, it's bright, like bright red, I can imagine. Bright and strong, and kind of just like you can't miss it. You know?
Right in your face. My color is Scarlet Red. That's the name of the magazine. So I think it's gonna be very similar. Okay.
Yeah, it's in your face, but it's also like it's also a really nice, you know, nice color. And it's also in the branding of Give Your Best. So.
Yes. I love that. Thank you. Well, Sol, thank you very, very much for sharing what you do with us, what you aim to do with Give Your Best. That's a beautiful mission that you have started 3 years ago. That not only tackles clothing poverty, which in itself is amazing, but it also tackles fashion waste at the same time. And we know the fashion industry is one of the most polluting in the world. So why not combine the two, guys who listen? And I wanted to mention it supports at least 2 UN SDGs, SDG 1 about no poverty, and SDG 12 about responsible consumption and production. So let's all reflect on this. I will add references in the show notes about Give Your Best, how people can find you if they want to contribute or become a volunteer, or follow your adventures, because there will be a lot more coming, more good fashion shows, I'm sure. And thank you very much for coming as a guest on the podcast.
No, thank you so much for having me and for your support.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for watching and listening, and I'll talk to you soon.
Can't stop now, don't you know? I'm never gonna let you go. Don't